back we can, because that mannequin in the beginning,
By this time, you
survived by an
probably
ice
noticed
age.
one thing you haven't seen in our museum to this point, and that is a Delaware Indian. The reason you haven't seen an Indian is a sad story, but one that's true for many North American Indian tribes today. Prior to contact with a white man, there were as many as 10,000 Delaware Indians living in a group in this part of the Pocono. First of all, there were three things that helped destroy the Indians. Diseases were brought here by the colonists, and they killed the Delawares in many numbers. A great colonial trick, if you wanted to acquire more land from the Indians, was to give an Indian clothing that had been worn by someone who had died of smallpox. The Indian would wear the clothing to the village, and that way infect the entire clan. The second problem was modern technology. The Indians were thrown from the Stone Age into the use of iron tools, guns they called magic sticks, and liquor they called firewater. But the final straw was fellow man's treachery to the Indians, and the way it was done to the Delawares was known as the famous Walking Purchase Treaty of 1737. Thomas Penn, who was William Penn's son, devised a phony treaty that said the distance a man could walk in a day and a half would be one side of a parcel of land to be given to the colonists. Under pressure from the Iroquois to the north, the Delawares were forced to sign the treaty, and on the day of the walking purchase, they met in Wrightstown, Pennsylvania, bringing with them tobacco and pipes, ready for a nice walk in the forest with their fellow white men. If you look at the lighted map on the wall, you'll see how the walking purchase transpired. On the day of the walk, Thomas Penn appeared with 3 English foot runners that he had hired, and the lead runner was named Edward Marshall. The village of Marshall's Creek, 8 miles south on Route 209, was named after him. In a day and a half, he had run 65 miles. The orange section on the map shows the land that the Indians thought would be the maximum amount of property that Penn could acquire. The red line leading to the black mark, which is in Carbon County, Pennsylvania, shows the end of the walk. According to the agreement, the line should then be drawn at the furthest point to the nearest point on the Delaware River. But instead, Thomas Penn had the line drawn parallel to the Delaware River, and instead of taking in approximately 25,000 acres of land, the colonists just acquired 1/2 acres from the Indians. The Indians no longer had a homeland, and they were forced to burn their lodges and begin a slow westward migration that took approximately 100 years.
100 years is a long time. I get it. I gotta go. Working a flaming hot ball of dough, find a bathroom around here.
As each treaty was broken, the Delawares were forced to move further on westward, so that by the time of the Civil War, for the most part, the Delawares found themselves in Oklahoma and southern Canada. Today, however, there are less than 2,000 Delaware Indians of mixed blood living on reservations in Oklahoma, Colorado, Wisconsin, and southern Canada. One of the most famous Delaware Indians of recent history was a woman named Nora Thompson Dean. Her Indian name was Touching Leaves Woman. She lived in Dewey, Oklahoma, and was famous because she was the last Indian still alive who went through the puberty rites that young men and women went through when they reached adulthood. She was the last herbologist, and she also was the last speakers of the Lenape language. Touching Leaves visited our museum during the American Bicentennial, and we were very unhappy to hear of her passing. This brings our tour to a close. However, there are many interesting artifacts in this room representing Kiowa, Cheyenne, and Sioux Indian culture. These displays are part of a collection acquired from the late Mr. Edwin Tribal of Stroudsburg, whose great-grandfather began collecting artifacts along Shawnee and Delaware in 1784. In fact, Mr. Tribal's grandfather was an acquaintance of Colonel DeWitt C. Peters, who was a personal friend of the famous Indian scout, Kit Carson. In the center of the room is a Cree Indian scalp, which was given to Mr. Tribal by Colonel Peters along with the original letter describing how the scalp was obtained. There is also an original copy of the story of Kit Carson's life and adventures written by Colonel Peters in 1874. You are welcome to browse through the museum at your leisure, and if you have any questions, someone in the gift shop will be glad to help you. Kindly turn off the recorder now, and thank you for coming.